$0. That is where the simulation starts. Not a hypothetical zero, a real one. The same zero that existed the moment before someone first heard about XRP or XLM or HBAR and made a decision. That the rest of this video is going to trace forward in time all the way to 2030. And the reason I want to start at zero is because the distance from zero to wherever you are now, whatever you currently hold across these three assets, is a journey that has already happened. You have already lived through some version of what I am about to describe, and the distance from where you are now to 2030 is a journey that has not happened yet. But the historical cycle data, the documented price behavior of these three assets across every rally, every crash, every recovery, every period of frustrating sideways consolidation tells us something specific about what that forward journey looks like. Not precisely, not with certainty, but with a structural pattern that is repeated enough times to be genuinely informative. So let me walk you through both journeys. The one that already happened, grounded in verified historical prices, and the one that is still coming, grounded in what those historical prices tell us about the structure of the cycles ahead. Let's start with XRP because it has the longest documented history and the richest cycle data of the three. XRP launched in 2012. The price was effectively zero for years, fractions of a cent. And then something happened in 2017 that nobody was fully prepared for. Not because the technology changed overnight, not because a single institutional announcement arrived, but because a combination of retail speculation, early institutional curiosity, and growing awareness of Ripple's payment corridor vision converged simultaneously with a broader crypto market euphoria that had been building throughout the year. From under 1 cent in early 2017, XRP rose to $3.84 by January 2018, a 50,000% gain in approximately 12 months. If you held 1,000 XRP at the start of that run, worth less than $10 at the beginning, it was worth $3,840 at the peak. If you held 100,000 XRP at under 1 cent, a starting investment of roughly $1,000, it was worth $384,000. And then the crash. Before we continue, if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in joining my GCRIG arbitrage trading team. Leave a comment on this video or send me a direct message on WhatsApp or Telegram using the links in the description. You can also sign up directly using the link below. Now, let's get back to the topic. In 2018 through 2020, a decline of 96.7%. $3.84 became 11 cents. The people who bought at the peak in January 2018 watched 97% of their investment evaporate over 27 months. Not quickly, slowly, painfully. Every month that went by with the price lower than the month before, reinforcing the narrative that the rally had been a mistake, that XRP was going nowhere, that the thesis was wrong. This is the first documented lesson from XRP's historical cycle. The crashes are not quick, they are not merciful. They take everything the bull run generated in excitement and optimism and they grind it down slowly over years until the people who cannot hold anymore finally sell. And then, and only then, the recovery begins. The recovery from 11 cents in March 2020 to $1.96 in April 2021, a 17 times move in 13 months, except that recovery was capped, suppressed, because the SEC filed a lawsuit against Ripple in December 2020, accusing XRP of being an unregistered security, and most of 2021, which should have been XRP's breakout year, as Bitcoin and Ethereum both shattered their previous all-time highs, was instead spent in legal limbo. XRP hit $1.96 in April 2021 and then fell back. Bitcoin hit $69,000 in November 2021. Ethereum hit $4,866. XRP was at approximately $1. While the entire market celebrated, XRP sat in the corner. That is the second documented lesson. External suppression can prevent an asset from participating fully in a bull cycle, even when everything else suggests it should. The thesis can be completely intact, and the price can completely fail to reflect it for years. And then the resolution, the legal victories through 2024, the ETF approvals in November 2025, the regulatory clarity arriving from the SEC and CFTC jointly classifying XRP as a digital commodity in March 2026, and the third cycle peak, $3.65 in July 2025, arriving exactly 1,556 days after the April 2021 peak. 4 years of waiting, a move from 29 cents at the June 2022 cycle low when most people had given up, to $3.65, a 12.5 times return for anyone who held from the bottom of the second bear market to the top of the third cycle. And now, as of the time of recording, $1.10, 70% below the $3.65 cycle high, down from $2.34 in January 2026, back in the range where the historical pattern says we are somewhere between the cycle high and the cycle low, in that grinding phase where the people who need the price to cooperate to maintain their convictions slowly leave their positions. The verified cycle analysis points to an average cycle length of approximately 1,414 days from peak to peak from the July 2025 high. The projected next cycle window is approximately late 2028 to mid-2009, 4 years from the last high. Now XLM, and the XLM story is the XRP story wearing a slightly different suit. Both assets launched in the same era. Both participated in the 2017 to 2018 mega rally. XLM hit 93 cents in January 2018, while XRP was hitting $3.84. Both crashed through 2018 and 2019. Both showed a muted recovery in 2021 relative to what Bitcoin and Ethereum achieved. XLM hit approximately 75 cents in May 2021 against its 93 cents all-time high, closer to its previous peak than XRP managed relative to its own, because XLM did not face the SEC lawsuit suppression that capped XRP's recovery. And then XLM followed XRP down through 2022 and 2023, 18 cents as of the time of recording, 80% below its all-time high of 93 cents. The same structural position as XRP, well into what the cycle data says is an accumulation phase, following a cycle high that occurred in 2025. The documented lesson from XLM's historical price behavior is this: XLM has never set a new all-time high in nominal terms. In any cycle after 2018, its 2021 peak at 75 cents was below its 2018 peak of 93 cents. Its 2025 cycle activity peaked somewhere in the range of 30 cents to 40 cents, also below the all-time high. XLM's price history is not a story of exponential growth compounding from one cycle to the next. It is a story of large percentage moves within a band that has expanded slower than assets like Bitcoin or Ethereum, but has also survived, remaining consistently in the top 20 to 30 crypto assets by market cap across more than a decade of cycles where thousands of other projects simply disappeared. This is XLM's specific, documented, historical characteristic. It survives, it participates, it does not lead. And the question that its 2030 projection asks is whether the Franklin Templeton integration, the DTCC settlement role, the Clearstream custody listing, the $3.35 billion in tokenized real-world assets, whether these constitute a new institutional demand layer that breaks the pattern of XLM underperforming its previous highs. The bull case says yes. The historical pattern says it has not happened yet in any previous cycle. Now, HBAR, the youngest of the three, launched on mainnet in August 2018 during the tail end of the 2017-2018 mega rally, which means HBR missed the only truly extraordinary retail euphoria cycle of the modern crypto era. Its first major price data begins March 2021 at 32 cents. It peaked at 57 cents in September 2021, almost entirely within the 2021 bull market window, and then it crashed to 36 cents by December 2022, a 93.7% drawdown, the deepest proportional crash of the three assets in that bear cycle. And here's what makes the HBAR historical data so interesting when you compare it to XRP and XLM. HBAR's best year by average price was not 2021 when its all-time high occurred. It was 2024, an average price of $0.0995 across the year, closing at $0.269 in December 2024, with a high of 38 cents to 39 cents. HBAR was building momentum in 2024, while XRP was also recovering. The 2024-2025 period represented both assets finding new cycle highs, XRP at $3.65, HBAR at approximately 50 cents in its cycle. And then the correction arrived and brought both back to current levels. HBAR's documented cycle pattern shows it moving with a lag behind XRP. It participates in the same macro crypto cycles, but arrives at its peaks months later than XRP. And it has shown in 2024 the ability to build momentum and reach significant percentages of its all-time high, even in a market that was not fully in euphoria mode. It reached approximately 87% of its all-time high in 2024, without the retail mania that drove Bitcoin to new highs in 2021. Now, the forward simulation. What does all of this documented historical cycle behavior suggest about the path from $1.10 for XRP, 18 cents for XLM, and 75 cents for HBAR today through to 2030? The XRP cycle analysis is the most specific documented average cycle length of approximately 1,414 days from peak to peak. From the July 2025 high, the projected next peak window is approximately late 2028 to mid-2029, which means the simulation from today, assuming the historical pattern holds, runs like this. From $1.10 today, the historical drawdown pattern from the third cycle, which saw XRP fall 85.2% from the April 2021 peak to 29 cents in June 2022, would imply a potential bottom somewhere between 40 cents and 70 cents in the current corrective phase before the next accumulation cycle begins. Not a prediction, the historical range. The current price of $1.10 is already showing the gradual descent from $3.65 that follows every XRP cycle high. The question is where it finds its floor, whether at the Fibonacci levels the cycle analysts have identified between 53 and 67 cents, or somewhere lower, and then the recovery from whatever the floor is. Let's use 60 cents as the middle of the documented historical support range to the next cycle peak projected in the late 2028 to mid-2029. Standard Chartered's 2030 target is $28. The mainstream analyst consensus clusters between $5 and $15. The conservative floor is $4 to $5. The simulation from 60 cents to $5 in the next cycle is an 8x move, roughly consistent with the documented multiplier from the 2022 low of 29 cents to the 2025 high of $3.65, which a 12.5 times move, similar magnitude, different starting price. XLM's simulation follows the same macro cycle structure with its own characteristic behavior. From 18 cents today through whatever the floor the current corrective phase produces. Historical XLM corrections have run 80–90% from cycle highs, suggesting a potential floor somewhere between 4 cents and 15 cents in the current phase, and then into the next cycle's recovery window. If XLM follows its historical pattern of reaching approximately 60–80% of its previous all-time high in the next cycle peak, the simulation points towards 60–75 cents as a conservative next cycle peak, and potentially higher if the institutional adoption layer generates demand that breaks the historical pattern. The 75 cents to $1.50 range sits comfortably within the range of what XLM's historical behavior would suggest for a next cycle peak if the institutional adoption story is real and building. Now, HBAR, the emotionally most interesting simulation, because it has the most room to run from current levels. At 7.5 cents today, HBAR is 87% below its all-time high of 57 cents. In the 2024 recovery, it reached approximately 38–39 cents, 67–68% of its all-time high before the current correction arrived. The simulation for HBAR suggests the next cycle could see it approach or potentially exceed its all-time high for the first time. The institutional adoption layer, the DTCC patent, the enterprise deployments, the legal layer for AI founding membership, the Merck supply chain production deployment represents demand infrastructure that did not exist during any of HBR's previous cycles. If that demand infrastructure converts into visible token demand during the next cycle, the peak window, the scenario where HBR breaks its 57 cents all-time high and reaches the 87 cents to $2.20 range by 2030, is structurally supported by both the historical cycle pattern and the new institutional demand layer that makes this cycle different from previous ones. And now the number the title promises, $100 million. Not a guarantee, a simulation. Here's what the simulation requires: a combined position across all three assets that participates in the next documented cycle, starting from zero today and building methodically, consistently, through the corrective phase that history says is currently underway toward the cycle peak window that the historical data places at approximately late 2028 to 2029, and then holding through that peak into the 2030 consolidation that follows it. The path to 100 million from zero today requires one of two things: either an extraordinary position size in a conservative scenario, something in the range of the sovereign tier we defined in the previous video, deployed at current prices and held to the full cycle, or a meaningful position size in a bull scenario, something much smaller that benefits from the institutional demand layer, breaking the historical pattern in all three assets. Simultaneously, the simulation does not pick one. It presents both as the documented range of outcomes, because the historical cycles say one thing: these assets move in large percentages from their floors, and they have done it repeatedly across documented data. And the institutional demand layer says something additional, that this cycle has demand drivers that previous cycles did not have. And the combination of those two signals is what produces a range from the conservative scenario all the way to the extraordinary outcomes that the bull case implies. 0 to 100 million from three assets that have documented historical cycles showing the ability to produce extraordinary percentages from their floors in an environment where institutional demand is building on all three networks simultaneously in ways that have never existed in any previous cycle, toward a 2030 window that sits at the projected recovery peak of the next documented cycle. The simulation does not end at 100 million, it ends at wherever you are holding when 2030 arrives. And the documented historical behavior of all three assets says that the difference between zero and wherever you end up is almost entirely determined by one variable. Not the price target you pick, not the analyst you follow, not the new cycle you are watching, whether you are still holding when the cycle turns. If this simulation this specific walkthrough that you documented historical cycles of all three assets and what they suggest about the path to 2030 changed how you see the current price weakness and what it represents in context, please smash that like button, because the historical cycle data is the most honest framework available for evaluating where these assets are and where the pattern says they are going. The like puts this in front of every holder who needs to see it before the cycle turns. Subscribe, because this channel uses verified historical data to simulate forward paths rather than inventing narratives. The cycles are documented, the pattern is real, and understanding it is what keeps you holding when the price is telling you to sell. Here's the comment I want. Based on the documented cycle data, XRP averaging 1,414 days from peak to peak, HBAR lagging XRP with a similar pattern, XLM following the same macro cycle. Do you think the next cycle peak arrives closer to late 2028 or mid 2029? And do you think the institutional adoption layer we have documented across all three assets breaks the historical pattern or confirms it? Real debate. Show your reasoning. Share this with anyone holding XRP, XLM, or HBAR who's been making decisions based on the current price without understanding the documented cycle context that explains exactly why the price is where it is and what the historical pattern says comes next. The simulation starts at 0. The cycle turns on its own schedule. Make sure you are still holding when it does. Have a great day. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to join my free Telegram community with the link on my channel where I post my daily crypto experience and arbitrage opportunities you can't get anywhere else. This is XRP Pobert signing off.